All right, it was good to get that first conference win under our belt, and I think like I expressed after the game, it wasn't easy. Guys had to fight for it. I think a lot of that credit goes to Idaho State continuing to go after it, and they definitely have some players that can cause some problems, but ultimately I think our physicality, I think, showed through in the fourth quarter, and our guys didn't panic. I think being down or getting to that point where it was down to a one-score game, we responded, with a touchdown, a big play, and then got a stop, and then a drive and a touchdown. So pleased with the way it finished, and I know you look at the film, a lot of things that we can correct, and that's I think our guys are eager to do that. It'd be great to be back home this week and have another, obviously, a conference foe. I do want to acknowledge our crowd down there. It was significant. In an environment like that, when you have that many fans, I think that certainly helps us out. So pleased with that, and we look forward to getting back home and playing in front of a stadium full of our fans. But that was awesome to see down there. So in Northern Colorado, we face a team that that has been struggling record-wise. Saying that they've competed really well at times this year. They took Abilene Christian, who's a ranked team, right to the brink. It took a last second field goal for Abilene Christian to win that game. They've played really a pretty decent schedule to this point, and they've had flashes. I know that the Abilene Christian game is the one that stands out. They were competitive with Colorado State, Incarnate Word. They've had some challenges. They've played 5 different quarterbacks this year. Anytime you even say or think that in itself makes your stomach turn as a coach. So that's created some issues for them offensively. I know on the flip side, defensively, they've played some really good stretches of defense and have some really talented players on that side of the ball. So it's a big week for us to keep moving forward. I think we got out of that game pretty well intact health-wise. I know we're another week closer to some of our guys being able to get back. I don't think this is a week for Polidor, Davis, Perkins by any means, but they're out there practicing, doing more. In the case of Drew and Julius, more this week, so another step for them. And I know we're anxious to again get back home and get this conference schedule continuing to move, and just so happens that Northern Colorado is the next one up. So with that, I'll open up for questions.
I know it looked like Taki went out with something, but he's on the depth chart, so he's fine.
I think it was didn't finish the game. We'll see how it goes through the week. He hasn't been ruled out this week by any means. I know John will miss the first half. It was a good targeting call, but I think he continued to make strides. That cash should be off his hand this week. So yeah, that's the update on Taki. I guess going back to him.
Marquis, he wasn't out there on kickoff.
Yeah, Marquis didn't make the trip. Marquis in the last game, I don't know if you remember the one kickoff return, he got taken into the sideline. That did cause enough of injury that will keep him out for at least a couple weeks. I didn't know where that was this time Monday last week, I guess, but as we move through the week, it looked like it would be significant enough to keep him out for a couple of weeks.
Ontario will still be there.
Yeah, we put Ontario out there for one game. I know we're still conscious of redshirting him, so I don't know that that'll be this week's answer necessarily. I think a lot of it goes into the kick return game in itself is, are you going to get opportunities? I think we felt like there was potential for opportunities against Idaho State, so we went with Ontario. I think he's got some real potential to be a returner. We'll see how that looks this week. I know whether it's a combination. I know Jared White would be a potential guy back there. I think Ty McCullough could be a potential guy. We could put Taco back there. I mean, we got some other guys, but it won't be Marquis, and I don't know that it would be Ontario this week.
A team that plays that many quarterbacks, I guess, what is the preparation like as you kind of watch UNC film?
Well, I think we feel like there's a couple guys that are just out. So you narrow in on the guys that you feel like will play. and what is their mode, what is their style. I know in this past game, it didn't appear that those guys the two guys they played are going to be out for this week. Two different types. I know one much more of a runner, and as far as their running game goes, they do have an element of the quarterback run, and he would be the main threat, number 10, and then the young guy number 11 they played as well. So I think those are the guys you prepare for. You prepare for the offense that those two have run, because it has been a variety based on who's been playing quarterback for them.
And then I guess just the rest of their offense, just skill position. And
yeah, I think running back wise, they got some good players, for sure. And I think the passing game, hard to tell, I guess, at some point, because I think that's been dictated by who's been playing quarterback. I do know they have some capable guys there. They got a big, tall tight end that they like to get involved. So yeah, I think we got to prepare for them continue to make progress with the two guys that they played this past week, knowing that they do have some capable skill, whether it is running back, receiver, or tight end.
And then I guess just defensively, anything that stands out.
Well, I think they got some good players up front. I know that's always the first thing that jumps out to you, whether a team, how they're going to hold up front. And I do think they have, in their front seven, some talented players, some good size, some good athleticism for that size. They've been able to disrupt run games at times. They move in and out of different fronts. They're not afraid to pressure. So, they've had a bunch of different games. I think that's how you look at it a little bit. They've played, really well at times defensively and held some teams down. And then they've had, like these last 2 weeks where they've been playing from behind. They gave up some big plays to Cal Poly. That was really the nature of that game, was Cal Poly making some really big plays. It wasn't their ability to sustain much. And it was big plays in the passing game, in particular, a couple of deep shots that got behind them. So I'm sure those are things that they'll work to correct. I think anytime you're down there trying to stop the run, you're devoting people to it, and you're making yourself vulnerable downfield, and that's kind of what happened more than anything this past game. So, yeah, I think they got a good front, and they can disrupt a run game, and obviously that's what we want to do, is be able to establish a run game. So I think that's where the battle certainly starts.
This weekend's matchup being homecoming, having the 1984 team come back and be honored this Saturday, just kind of what that means to your program and just having them back.
Yeah, it's obviously a year and a team that is very important to the tradition here at Montana State. That team doing what it did after a year where they won one game, and then the next year all of a sudden they get on this magical run, and take it all away. They've left their mark. And while there's a lot of guys from that team that are in the community, I know there's upwards towards 40 plus between players and coaches that are going to be around here, 40th anniversary. So looking forward to it. I know, anytime you can honor a national championship team, not all programs can do that. And unfortunately for us, there's 3 of those teams in our past history. So obviously they're the most recent, and it'll be great to have a lot of those guys back in town.
Does the Northern Colorado near win over Abilene Christian, and then you kind of think about like Davis winning this week at Idaho after Idaho looked so great, does it kind of remind you just how unpredictable week to week this league and this
yeah, and I think just college football in general, you start getting into all this score comparing. I think it's a place to set some benchmarks, and even just talking Abilene Christian, Abilene Christian almost loses to Northern Colorado, and then they have this tight game with Idaho. You look at a team like Maine. Maine comes in here and we play really well to start. They've stacked up a couple wins. They beat UAlbany, who's in this mix of teams that is considered a ranked team, and so I just think you have to be ready every week. You're gonna, when you're a team that's on the top of the conference, you should expect everyone's best. And teams being consistent and being able to bring their best every week is just not the reality of sports. That's what we want to do, but it's not the reality. So you could pull it out of the FBS, you could pull it out of the FCS. That there's surprises, there's inconsistencies all over the map, and so the first week of conference play, the first full week of conference play, I think certainly had some surprises, and what we got to do is certainly guard against ourselves being surprised, and that's more so just all of a sudden we just show up and lay an egg. We can't do that. It might be a struggle. I think how Idaho State, how that game played out, I think we felt like we're in control, but this other team's trying really hard too and playing really hard, and you're going to get their best. So being able to outlast them is what we have to be about each and every week. So, I would expect Northern Colorado to bring their best this week, and we'll have to hopefully bring our best right back at them.
And to that point, you haven't lost to a below 500 team, FBS, FCS, in your tenure now at MSU. So how prideful are you of that track record?
Well, I think it's a mark of our consistency. I think it's a mark of our guys. Really, when we come in here on a Monday morning, you talk about what you need to correct. You watch the film. You allude to the next opponent to some degree, but really, what can we do to keep getting better? What can we do to make sure we make the most of this opportunity? In college football, you only get this year 12 guaranteed to you. So shame on you if you don't go out every week and give it your all and try to show up with the same team, in a team that's improving. I know a lot gets made out of big games and all this. They're all big. I think that's probably the biggest thing. I think we've continued to pound home how each and every one of our games is big. They all count as one. You want your record to keep growing and getting better, certainly, but they're all big games, and Northern Colorado's the next one. And I this is another great test for us to remain this consistent outfit that's about its own improvement more than who they're playing.
We spoke with Zach Cruz earlier, and he was specifically thankful for you and the rest of the coaching staff for giving him this opportunity. So what can you kind of add, about the impact you guys had for him?
Yeah, well, I think so. He's been with us for quite some time now, and I think who he is has played out through that time. He was a young man that made a huge mistake, and we knew enough of him prior to that mistake, of who we thought he was, to ultimately give him that chance. And he's done nothing but earn his teammates' respect, go about his business. He's a great student here at Montana State. He's been a great teammate, and he's starting to obviously show up on Saturdays more and more on the field. So, when we brought him on, there was certainly some perceived risk, I guess. But I think deep down inside, we felt like, okay, he was a person that was worth giving another chance, and that's I think, like I said, to this point, I think it's played out how we would have expected, not hoped. I guess that's probably how I would finish that statement.
Is there an example of his character that he's shown?
I just think he just fits in. He's just he enjoys his team. I think he loves competing. He loves playing the game of football. He takes his studies really seriously. So no, I think he's the type of person you want in your team, and it wasn't easy at the beginning, and there was respect that needed to be earned. It wasn't just, hey, you're on the team, you're stamped as you got it all figured out. It was about him just going about his business. Really, thinking back to that whole first calendar year, I think he was who he was on a daily basis, and that in itself won his teammates over and his coaches and everything. So I don't think it's any one thing. I think it's just this is who he is much more than obviously one huge mistake.
And just one thing from the ISU game, there were some comments about running it at the end instead of kneeling it. Can you
Yeah, that's fair. It was, we didn't think we were gonna have to run another play, and then Adams' helmet popped off, so we had to run another play. We ran the ball up the middle. I don't think our intention was to pile it on, but we ended up scoring again. I don't like the fact that that's the way it appeared. That wasn't our intention. We were trying to get out of there with a win. Hindsight, being what it is, we should have just kneeled on it, quite frankly. So there was no intention to do anything more than just to finish the game, and it ultimately played out the way it did. We scored another 6 points, and that wasn't really done for any reason. We were just trying to snap the ball one more time because we had to, because the Adams helmet popped off.
Coulter, do you have anything?
Yeah, Coach, a couple from me. First of all, do you have any crossover with Coach Lamb in your career? He's a defensive guy. He's always been really good defensively. So I guess two parts. Do you have any crossover with him, and how would you describe the way they look defensively this year?
Yeah, so he was a coach at BYU when we played them in the Poinsettia Bowl in 2016, and then I would guess there would have been a year maybe at Southern Utah. I can't even remember the last time we played Southern Utah at North Dakota State. So I would think there would have been a year or so there. Maybe we missed him by a year, but no, I think he's brought a principled nature to their outfit. All that being said, that it takes time for all this to take hold. I defensively, they're aggressive. They're certainly built around, to me, their front four. They play a lot of guys up front. They give you a bunch of different looks. Their looks all make sense at the same time. They're not just throwing things up against the wall and seeing if they stick. They have made it hard for teams at times to move the football. They've been playing from behind a lot these last couple of weeks, so that exposes you a little bit more, I suppose. And they've been on the field quite a bit the last couple of weeks defensively at the same time, but that group has continued to fight and scratch and claw and do all they could. So I just getting to know him a little bit through our interactions, through the conference meetings and such. Got a lot of respect for who he is as a person, and I think he's has a track record, obviously, with the head coaching success at Southern Utah that you can see that they're making strides at Northern Colorado.
When it comes to honing in consistency of a football team, is that a direct action daily? Is that something you can recruit to personality-wise? How do you sort of make the whole picture when it comes to honing in consistency? So you talk about that being a hallmark of your program a lot.
Yeah, I think there's some element of recruiting the right types of guys. Whether they have it all figured out or not, you feel like they can figure it out. Guys that are choosing your program for the right reasons, which generally speaking are centered around team. And I think just continuing the language that we do from day one of trying to really be present in the moment, trying to do everything we can in any particular day, talking a lot about sacrifice and doing whatever it takes for the team. I know Coach Herron, puts them in a lot of team situations through the course of the off season, and so you're constantly about much more than just yourself. And I think when it's about that, you figure out how to give your all, and the more guys that think that way, the more consistent you're going to be. You can't ride that wave, say, in the off season with just your effort and how you go about your business and showing up on time or lack thereof, and all of a sudden think on a Saturday that's going to all of a sudden change, or during the fall when you're practicing football that's going to change. So I think a bunch of credit goes to Coach Herron and his staff for how we operate through the off season, and then I think our guys, if we don't have a lot of outliers, I would say, so that's a positive, right? We don't have a lot of guys that don't fit in. and if they don't, it's a short-term thing where, not short-term meaning they're gone, but short-term, okay, they figure out how to fit in. Our transfers by and large, I think wherever they're coming from, they get here, and I think they really appreciate what we're about. And I think we've done a good job in trying to identify that on the recruiting side. But guys fit in, or they figure out how to fit in, and we got older guys that hold them accountable, and coaches that hold them accountable throughout the year. And ideally, that creates a consistency then that shows up on Saturdays.
You mentioned, I think 2 weeks ago, about how everybody's going to give Montana State their best shot. Now, Montana State's had great teams over the years, but that's been consistently true now for 5, 6, 7 years, with you guys always being in the top 5, top 10 nationally. So how much of a learning process is that? Just truly knowing, like, hey, this could be the Super Bowl for the team that you're playing, but much maybe like it might be this weekend.
Yeah, we've talked about it a lot this year. Don't let your perception dictate your performance. And you can get caught up into this wave of, okay, what it looks like on film, or you can look at scores, you can look at stats and have this perception, well, this team isn't this or that. But to your point, I mean, we got to, whatever you see as this team's best, that's what you got to expect, So I know in this instance, you can point right to one game, the Abilene Christian game, and expect what you see there. Expect that. Doesn't mean you don't watch the other games. Doesn't mean you don't take inventory of what else has happened. But expect their best. Like a team like Idaho State. I mean, they had been up and down through their first 4 games, but when they flashed, they flashed, and that's what you got to expect. We've been consistently at the top now for a few years, and our environment is one, when we play at home, this is what you want to play in. So these opposing teams, they feed off of that no different than our teams do, and we hope it has an impact negatively on them, but there is this positive impact that it has on young men coming in here on other teams and saying, this is what it's all about. We talked about that a few weeks ago with Mercyhurst. They're going to play in front of hundreds, if maybe thousands of fans here and there, but all of a sudden they get in this environment, they're playing against 20, or against us, but in front of 20,000 plus. That's going to bring something different out of them. So I think just continue to be real about those conversations and what what this team we're facing can do, and expect that. And on the flip side, hey, we got to find a way to keep bringing our best, and that's, you want to make it more about that ultimately, but expecting another team to show up and play is what we do.
Big picture question, sort of related to the Zach Cruz scenario, but I've always thought that football is such a great example of multiculturalism, of people from all different places and backgrounds and stuff coming together. That's particularly true in small places like Fargo, North Dakota, and Bozeman, Montana. Do you agree? And if so, how much can a football team sort of be an example of how multicultural organizations can work?
Well, you'd like to think a well put together football team should be what you want society to look like. Meaning we have all different types of backgrounds, whether it's the size of the community young men come from, the location in our country. Obviously, race comes into play. Backgrounds that your family has. I mean, all these differences that come together, and at the same time, these guys are 18 to 22, 23 years old, and they're in this stage where they are starting to make their own choice about who they are, what they believe in, more so than they have to this point. Talk about it a lot, and get our guys together to talk about their backgrounds. And that being said, when you're growing up, you're at the mercy of your background, so to speak. Whether that's your location, your family background, whatever. And some of that's positive, some of it's not. And ultimately, what we can do through this stretch of time is hopefully learn about one another, why we think the way we do, and really have a positive impact, and then allow our guys to go out into their lives and be a positive impact entirely. I think that's how I look at it as a head coach, is how wherever these guys come from, whatever their thinking is, can we shape and mold them through the next 4 or 5 years to then they can have this impact on their community, on their family that is positive. And maybe to your point at the beginning, boy, if society thought that way, we'd really have something.
When it comes to Zach specifically, you mentioned him in the classroom. I think he's valedictorian of Central High School. I mean, he's a really smart guy, and it seems like he's just competitive in all elements of his life. So how much did that play into just, like you said, he didn't really think this was a big risk. So how much did just sort of all the other stuff play into your guys' decision?
I think it all mattered. There was an impression made on the front end recruiting. There certainly was the impression I allowed Coach Oliver in particular at Sentinel High to share with me who he was, but it went farther than that at Sentinel High, what the people there thought of him. Zach had a lot of people come to me with support. Supporting him, supporting who he was. And I think that all had an impact. But it really initially went back to the opinion that myself and our staff had on that front end of kind of who we thought he was. And was he the type of person where that instance of that mistake was who he was, or was that a mistake that he could move on from? And we thought the latter, and we're not to the 2-year stage quite yet of him being a part of this program, but we're closing in on that, and he's been the latter. He's been in a lot of ways a model student, a model student athlete, all those things.
Last question for you. Are you growing up in North Dakota? Are you a Vikings fan? Minnesota?
I grew up a Vikings fan. I see your hat.
You still follow them at all?
I follow him enough to hopefully not get sucked in, but I follow him. I'm yes, it's primarily Vikings country where I grew up, and it's good to see them get off to a good start.
Yeah. Thanks, Coach. Appreciate
Yep, absolutely.
Anything else in the room?
I guess on the NFL front, Troy's pick six in his game.
Yeah, well, beyond this pick six, I've involved with 17 tackles. Pretty significant day for Troy, and ultimately, what I was excited is they won the game. I know it came down to a kick, which he had nothing to do with, but you have that type of impact on a game. Ultimately, I know Troy's biggest concern is whether they win or not.